MC Fireside Chats, a weekly show featuring conversations with thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and outdoor hospitality experts who share their insights to help your business succeed. Hosted by Brian Searl, the founder and CEO of Insider Perks, and powered by insights from Modern Campground, the most innovative news source in the industry.
Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of MC Fireside Chats in 2025. I am Brian Searl, the CEO of Insider Perks and Modern Campground as well. Super excited to be here with you in my kind of hacked together podcast studio background thing that I'm putting together here. Just kind of a new look. We were commenting before the show, further away from me, so you don't have to see my face as close. But, you know, super excited here to be here with you with a new kind of format. We're going to change up the format of the show a little bit this year. So we've got a couple new guests on the show. But this is technically week 2 because we missed week 1 of the new year. But the theme of this show is going to be enhancing guest experiences. And so we're going to talk about things like technology and customer service and innovative amenities and all that. And so we've got a recurring guest for the show. Joe Duemig is on here. We're going to let them introduce themselves in a second. But from At My Community, Casey Cochran from Campspot, Kevin Thueson from KCN Campground, Scott Foos from Horizon Outdoor Hospitality. And then we've got Brittany and Lelah, who are our special guests for this week from their individual campgrounds. So I'll let them introduce themselves as well. Let's go ahead and just start with our recurring guest since this is an all-new show. Let's bring back Scott Foos first. Hasn't been on the show for a long time, left us, got too important, and finally has made time for us again. So how you doing, Scott?
Hey, yeah, good. Good to see you guys. Good to be back. Brian, thanks for inviting me back after a year off or so from the show. And yeah, grateful to be here and to share and to learn. As Brian mentioned, I'm CEO and owner of Horizon Outdoor Hospitality. We manage 27 properties in 15 different states and provide, in addition to third-party management, professional services and consulting solutions. So looking forward to adding in and being a part of the conversation.
And you know, this is interesting, Scott. I don't think you realize this until I'm about to bring this up, but you're actually the sponsor of this show for Horizon Outdoor Hospitality, which I think wasn't intended because you weren't originally on the second episode. So maybe you'll want to shuffle that to a different week. But thank you for sponsoring the show from Horizon Outdoor Hospitality. A great campground management, RV park management company. If you're looking for third-party management, we got to get a commercial for you up here so that way more justice than my ugly face talking about you, right? But thanks for being the sponsor. I appreciate it. Let's go with Kevin Thueson from KCN next.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. You've asked me to be on this before and never been able to make it happen. So I'm excited to have a chance to be on here and meet everybody else and try and contribute in some way. So my background, really quick, I started as a campground owner 7 years ago, bought a KOA franchise, and over the past 7 years have grown that into now an investment company where we're about to close on our 9th park. We operate all of our own properties. We've built out a management team, and we're raising investor capital and looking forward to the next 5 to 10 years as we continue to acquire properties and scale and grow into a large portfolio enterprise. So it's been quite a roller coaster over the last 7 years, starting as a small park operator and then learning how to build that into a real business and bring on partners and build out a management team and learn how to do it right. So hopefully I can bring some of that experience and knowledge and value to the discussion. So thanks for having me.
Well, yeah, you for sure will. And I know that I think maybe we'll spend a little bit of this episode maybe diving in a little bit into the backstories of all 4 of you, since it's a brand new kind of show, and then we'll go, forward from there. But your story is a really great story. So I definitely want to dive into that. Joe, At My Community.
Yeah, I'm Joe Duemig. I'm the CEO and owner of At My Community. We make individual mobile apps for campgrounds. So each of our customers have their own app in the App Store. We do about 180 campgrounds now. And yeah, it's all about customer engagement and experience.
Joe, I remember when we first met each other and you were starting off, it was 2017. Is that right? Does that sound right?
It's probably, or beginning of 18.
Okay, yeah. I remember when you were a super small company, you're like, I'm never going to have employees. And now you've got like your wife is a COO, right? And then you got
Yep.
Bobby Sword now as CMO. And you're like this massive conglomerate.
I
Like,
wouldn't
you're
go
gonna
that
get
far.
Cochran.
I would not go that far. But our team meetings now have 10 people on them, so it's nice. It's been
Yeah, I'm
fun.
really happy for you. Like all the success that you've enjoyed. You have a great product. So
Thank you.
now we'll move on to somebody smaller, Casey from CampSpot.
Certainly smaller in title, man. All these C-level and owners, man. But no, Casey Cochran, VP of our partners and business development and some sales here and there, but really just kind of overseeing our supply and our multi-part groups and our key partners and trying to keep them happy is my focus these days. So CampSpot, we're a PMS, campground specific PMS and marketplace. We're about to cross over our 3,000th park here, hopefully the next few days, but we'll see. And so we work with a wide variety of campgrounds across North America. And we're trying to build the best product that serves the campground space from a technology standpoint, along with providing some additional exposure and reservations and eyeballs from our marketplace as a supplement to try to help our parks with some occupancy. So yeah, I started in 2018 beginning. We had about 32 parks, I think, on the system at the time. So it's been a good run here over the last 6 or 7 years. But yeah, I mean, I love the space. I love the company, and just as excited as I was day one as I am now. So it's been fun. And it's funny to say the 2018, because that's when I started. That's when I met you. I think it's when I met Scott. I think it's when I met Joe. Was that magical year, and here we all are still. So it's pretty cool.
It's fascinating. Like, I don't want to date myself, but I feel like, is it fair to say the first time I came across CampSpot was like 2013, 14, somewhere around there? Or is that too
It
old?
would have been 16. If you would have done it, it would have been in 2016, because that's when the code was being initially written.
Okay, so I remember like the first time I came across CampSpot was like, and I don't think I've ever told you this, was at a Jellystone conference.
Yeah,
I think, where you guys started, and I can't remember who ran the booth back then, but I remember like there was a couple Steve and Willa, you probably know these guys, Scott from Legacy, who were complaining to me about how like CampSpot didn't have a good POS system and it was completely terrible when scanned barcodes, and they were not going to use it. Like, obviously, you've come a long way since then.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up, but yeah, no, it's certainly has been, I mean, in 2016, if that was the case, it was probably more of a concept than it was an actual POS.
Oh, it was for sure. Like, you were like you were brand new.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then to be honest, I mean, we're a team of, Joe, I love seeing that you have 10 employees. I know many of them dear to my heart, but we're a team of about 120 people at this point. We've been pretty consistent there for the last year and a half. And it's still a work in progress, right? There's still, I mean, it's still like, and that's one of the things that's exciting, is it's something that's, we have a lot of work to do, a lot of things to accomplish, but do you think we got the right people and the right mindset and the right partners to figure it out? So
awesome. Well, thanks for being here. Let's introduce our special guests. So we have Brittany. You want to go first?
Oh, yeah. So my name is Brittany Mathis. I'm the owner of the Core Campground. We are in Tallinn, Connecticut, a really lovely little spot in the Northeast. We're moving into our 4th season being open, so we're fairly young. But we really love the camping industry and the memories we've made so far, and are like eager to advance in our community and across the board.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Brittany. I want to dive into the Core Campground and learn more about you in a few seconds here. Lelah, we've known each other for how long now? On and off, at least?
Wow.
Like, I think we feel like we see each other at a conference, and then like 2.5 years later, we're like, oh, hey, how have you been?
Yes, yeah, very much so. So it's funny that your two guests, we have a lot in common, and one of it is that we're from Connecticut. So we now have 2 parks in Connecticut, Brian. I don't know if you realize that we bought Cozy Hills Campground that was originally established in 1963 in the northwest corner. So we're the closest to New York and Massachusetts. We're on the other side from the port. And we bought that in 2014. It was originally established in 1963. And we grew it as big as we could. We were landlocked, and I have a low threshold for boredom. So we bought 365 acres, and we've just started developing that. We opened it for Memorial Day weekend, 2024. 93 sites for the second property. So they're only about 8 miles apart as the crow flies. So it's really interesting that we kind of compete with ourselves. And yet there's close enough together that there's a lot of fun synergy that we can do between the two properties. So I'm especially excited to be part of this podcast today. I think the customer experience is something that is always in the forefront of our mind. And then I'm a big, as Casey knows, although Casey might not be so thrilled to see me on this call, I'm a big technology fan, but it has to serve the guest experience. That's what it always comes back to. It either should make the guest experience better or your staff's experience better so that they can then deliver that for the guest. And it's a big passion of mine. Glad to be part of the dialogue.
I think what's fascinating to me, and I want to we'll just talk to you first here about Cozy Hill Campgrounds, or Cozy Hill Campgrounds and your other park. Sorry, it's really small for me. Like I'm sitting far away from the screen, and I am old and probably macular degeneration, all kinds of problems. I'm not quite at the age where the pot is legal for me to smoke, I think, for my eyes.
But you may be reaching the age where new glasses are in order, Brian.
Maybe.
There was a harsh realization about 6 years ago that glasses went from a convenience to a necessity. So, yeah.
Maybe. So maybe I'll just get a bigger monitor or bring it closer to me first.
Okay, sure.
Hang on to my young age as long as I can.
That's good, yeah.
It's really interesting to me what you bring up, and I want you to briefly tell us about your parks in a second before we dive into this, just because you're a special guest and we want to hear a little bit of the background there. But weaving it in with the guest experience is the focus of the show. It's really interesting when you say like it has to serve the guest experience, because I think the one thing that I've learned over a number of years doing marketing and advertising for so many different properties is that the guest experience is very much based on the perception of the individual guest. And so what the owner thinks is a good experience is obviously a good guide baseline, because you talk to way more of the guests than the individual person does. But everybody has a different use case for that, right? And we just talk about the reservation systems, CampSpot, New Books, Staylist, ResNexus, all those places, right? They all have different interfaces. I think they probably all have a good guest experience. The question is which one is the best one for your park and your type of guests, I think.
Oh, for sure. I'd say that there's a campground for everybody, and there's absolutely the same could be said for there is a reservation or property management software for everybody. I'll see a relatively small park post on Facebook and say, I'm looking for a reservation system. I have 40 sites and most of them stay with me at least a month. Well, they don't need to spend the kind of money that we invest in technology, right? They need a very probably straightforward, a little bit more simple program. And then they go all the way up to the programs like CampSpot, like New Book, that do a lot more. And, the price tag associated with that as well. And you have to decide what's the best fit. And yes, at the end of the day, I cannot judge if the guest is going to like what our software presents them. But again, if my staff is happy with it, it gives us these great tools that will hopefully get that feedback from the guest. One simple thing is right after a guest checks in, about 3 hours later, they get a text from us saying, and this is pretty basic in the hotel industry, right? This isn't rocket science, but they get a text. Hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are we doing so far? That is so key. I swear that one single text saves us a lot of pain and suffering. Because when we get a 3 back, that's me out at the campsite or my manager out at the campsite saying, whoa, where did it go off the rails? What can we do to help? That is the type of thing where, that technology can give you some quick and easy tools to start righting the ship if it hasn't gotten off on the right foot.
And we don't want to go too far deep into reservations, but you would think there would be somebody, sorry, Casey, that came up with a perfect reservation system. Like, look at Joe. Like, there's only one big app company.
I know.
Like, he's perfected it.
He's cornered it. He's perfected it. Just like there's only one management company that's got it, perfected it. He's on this call as well. It's like, it's crazy.
That's what I'm saying. Like, pick up the slack here, man. You need a, yeah.
It's trying.
But what do you think about this, Casey? Just real quick before we move on to reservation system, because it is an important part of the guest experience, right?
It is. Yeah. For sure. Our concept from really the beginning with the guest experience was, letting the park control what they want to control and allowing automation with what they want to be automated from the guest side of things. So, to start, typically most parks or most guests are going to start at a park's website, or they're going to start with a phone call potentially, right? And that guest experience starts then, right? That's the start of the journey to some extent. And then from there, it's getting them to what they're looking for as quickly as possible, as easy as possible, with everything that park has to offer as easily as possible. And really setting the experience and the tone for what they can expect when they show up. And it's interesting because some parks, are truly focused on automation, and labor is the biggest factor that they are focused on, not eliminating, but streamlining as much as they can. So they want online check-in. They want, that golf cart booked at the time of booking. They want the firewood sold already. They want express check-in. They want terms and conditions signed already. They want to know what site they're going to be on. And they want to just get in and go to the park and unpack and do their thing. And there's a lot of parks that say, wait, no, part of our experience is when they do check in is meeting us and me explaining where the good places are to eat and what there is to do at the park and showing them to their site. And so guest experiences, again, I think you touched on it and Lelah did as well. Like it's in the eye of the beholder, and it's also in the eye of the park owner, right? And what they want to focus on as far as on the experience they have for their guests. I mean, look at KOA with Kevin there. I mean, like they have a pretty good set of rules and guidance and parameters around what that experience will look, what the KOA is going to look like. Same thing with the yogis and things of that sort. And so from our end, from a technology standpoint, our goal is to embrace as much of the automation as possible, while also embracing as much of the user experience that the parks want to provide, and trying to find the balance in between. Because again, you roll out something like, online check-in, you roll out things like, automating terms and conditions. You do those things, but then you go, hey, only the 40 or 50% of campgrounds are adopting this. How is that possible? Why wouldn't they all be doing that? But there's all unique reasons as to why they may or may not adopt some of the technology within there. And you just have to respect and appreciate it, because again, at the end of the day, it's their park, and you're creating this space for those guests, and no one's going to know what space works better than those park operators or owners.
Yeah, and I think it's like the one thing that we talk about is kind of is different is the guest perception, but then you look at, and many park owners don't do this. I know Scott does at his company. I'm sure Kevin does at his, and I don't mean to leave Lelah and Brittany out, from a park owner perspective, but it's hard when you're a single park owner, right? Like trying to look at all the data and analytics, but there is data to tell you this. It's the conversion percentage of the people that are booking. And yes, that's not going to say like, well, they liked my modern font or my whatever, but indirectly it does, because they checked out and spent their money with you. It's a portion of that. Like, sure, the park is a bigger piece of that. What amenities you have, where's your location, was my staff friendly on the phone? But that definitely is a way to measure, I think, that guest happiness with that piece of the experience. And I don't know if I've said this to this group before, but please jump in. And if you have questions for whoever we're talking about, the less I talk, the better the show is. So feel free.
I was going to jump in from the kind of the camper point of view. My family, we do quite a bit of camping. We've spent 4 months out, 3 months out, 2 months out, different years, and travel to all different types of resorts. So also being kind of a veteran in this industry now, I know most of the reservation providers. So when I go and I book something and it's kind of a little glitchy running through their system, I go and tell them directly. But to the campground owner, what I would suggest is grab somebody green, like with the Chamber of Commerce that you work with or somebody that you work with. Ask them to go through the booking process that you're using right now. Sit there with them. Don't help them, but sit right behind them and watch them go through that booking process, because you're going to see if they run into an issue. There's one system that I went through and I would book, and I had to keep going back and forth between pages because of the order in which you pick dates and site types.
Do you want to tell us who that reservation system was? Or?
No, I would not like to.
Okay, all right.
I'll tell you, it's not Camp Spot. I can tell you that.
All right. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was just to kind of layer on to what Joe was sharing. I think it's so important to do that. We just did that as a team this morning for one of our properties that we went through the booking process, and it was stemmed from, we pulled some occupancy data, and we said these two cabin types are outperforming for the last 4 months. On a per occupied night basis, they're outperforming all the other cabins, which are probably even nicer than the one that was being booked up. And we started to ask why. Well, it's because waterfront there was a description of waterfront in front of the cabin name. Really, we realized, well, I think we were trying to be too cute before with some of these other names. I think that could be a part of it. There's other things like rate and how it's being described, but how it's being listed on your booking engine is really important. But outside of just names, looking at your pictures, having great imagery, really selling to that potential guest what it is that they can experience when they're on site, even directly in the booking engine, and click through your pictures and understand maybe which picture is the best picture to start with, because they're only looking at those options for like 10 seconds. They're going to scroll through really quick. If you don't have something that catches them or you think it looks good, so to Joe's point, get somebody that's maybe a trusted source that knows your area. I think the Chamber of Commerce, Joe, is a great idea, but you should be doing this regularly. We do it regularly, and we find a lot of stuff each time that, it's always an iterative process to improve.
Because everything's a key part of that journey, right? It's not just like waterfront is a big piece of that, but it's also the pictures, it's also the description, it's the text, it's the way it's presented, it's everything, right? Otherwise, you could just flood your campground and everything could be waterfront and you'd be fine.
Yeah,
but I feel like it's not a good strategy.
And one of the reasons
change the description to houseboats instead of cabins, and you're good to go.
But waterfront works better. We've A/B tested this, Kevin. It's waterfront.
All right. Well, you guys have touched on this already. Every touch point is a potential pain point, or it's something that's going to be, a promoter for you, right? If you apply the Net Promoter Score approach, whether that's the website, whether it's how many times they have to pay for something or additional fees, whether it's how many texts they're getting throughout. And I think the challenge as operators is we'll spend time on it and we'll think that we have it figured out. And then how often like Scott said, how often are you revisiting that? There's no like set it and forget. You can't solve the problem and then move on. The experience it's a never ending process, and you have to continually revisit that. And what's working today or what was working 2 years ago might not work tomorrow. And so you have to be able to identify those things and be creative. And, the concept of being, a secret shopper is fantastic, whether it's someone from your team or you bring someone outside. One of the things that we try and do is, as much as we can, is we go out and we experience what other people's campgrounds are doing. Like I can't tell you how many times I've pulled up reservations to book something online that is using CampSpot. And the first thing I'm doing is comparing that to what that looks like for my KOAs and how that reservation process goes for me as a guest versus for me as the business owner or the operator, right? And taking those learnings from those things. But again, it's, it is important. And whatever that cadence is going to vary depending on, the operator, the park, how much availability and bandwidth you have. But what's important is that you have to revisit it.
Well, and that's the elephant in the room, right? I think it's worthy of a discussion because we have a lot of people who are watching this show, like a Lelah or like a Brittany, who own 1, 2, 3 campgrounds, who don't have the staff of a KCN or a Horizon Outdoor Hospitality. And so obviously there are strategies where like this isn't something that you have to do a ton of work on yourself, I don't think, Kevin, because you have the whole KOA corporate team behind you doing all that study and about their booking engine specifically, right? The user experience is what I mean. But how do you balance that, Kevin, coming from that I owned 1 park to now I'm going to maybe close on, well, you are going to close on, hopefully. We won't jinx it, right? We'll say we're confident in that. 9 parks.
Yeah, it's, every level or every stage you're at it's a different set of problems or different set of puzzles to solve. And, I used to think when I had 1 park and, maybe a team of 4 or 5 people and I was there, most of the time, I would look forward to the day where we had grown and scaled and had an operations team that handled this and how much easier it was going to be and how much different. And it really doesn't take that long once you get to that next level where you are kind of pulled away from that day to day and you're not the one that's interfacing with the guests all the time and experiencing that. And now, like, there are a lot of times where I'll sit back and say, man, it would be great to just be a single park operator and have a chance to be behind the desk and talk to people and be a part of that experience and have that, first person, view of what's actually happening. Right. And so it doesn't matter where you are on that journey or, if you're trying to get from one to the other, it's the process you have to go through is very similar. and it's just a different approach to it. And I think that's what's important is recognizing that, you do have to change the way you do things based off of the situation you're in. And you might, have to go about it from a totally different creative way if you do have a team and you're not the one who's doing it, and learning to kind of transition your viewpoint or how your vision is for how the park should operate to the teams that are going to be doing that. It could be 2-3 levels removed from you, but then also recognizing, hey, these people are lifelong campers. They have their own point of view. Let me rely on what their experience is, because it might be very different from mine, and they might connect better with the experience of our guests than I would.
And that push and pull is always something that you're working on, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what business you're in. Like, I work on that at my company. Like, I still remember, like, I loved getting on the phone with the smaller operators, talking back like 2012, 13, when we just did review responses and we just did social and talking strategy with them. And now I still would love to do that, but it's just not possible for me at the scope and scale that we've grown to. And so I have to trust those team members, but also have to still make sure that I'm hearing all sides of the story so that we're providing the best client experience in our case, but same thing, guest experience, right?
Yeah, and one of the things that we're doing over the last couple of years, we started doing a KCN book club during the slower part of the year. And last year we read Unreasonable Hospitality, and we spent a week and kind of everyone took turns, from our managers to some of our corporate team, and presenting and sharing ideas. This year we're doing Fans First about the Savannah Bananas, and all with that idea of how do we better prepare ourselves for understanding the guest experience, what the touch points are, what the pain points are. But really what I've taken away, you asked this question, Brian, as someone who's kind of removed from the day-to-day operations of the parks, I have to now view it from, how do I provide that experience to my team? Not necessarily my guests, but the people that work for my company. Those are my customers. Those are my guests. And if I can create that culture and that experience for them, they will then turn around and do that for our guests and for their team members and for the work campers at each of our individual parks. So it really filters down.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Scott touched on this briefly about, images, and that was something that we've always been pretty adamant about, to the point where I think for a couple of years we would hire photographers and go out to campgrounds and take pictures for them.
I remember that.
We were so adamant about you have to display the property well online, and then that's going to convert online. And you touched on that, Brian, as far as online conversion. I can't speak to how valuable that is to track that and understand, even at the site type level, what online conversion percentage that is. And you're getting it in the averages of the 60s and 70s, and you have many parks now getting into the 80s and 90s of their percentages of their reservations taken online. But he's touched on the idea of an image, and one thing that we do kind of within our season reviews is often as we can with parks and groups is encourage them to look at and refresh their images, and even to the point where you're looking at conversion of whatever that first image is of that site as you're scrolling through those. Again, like Scott said, sometimes you might only see one image, maybe they see two, but there's images that are going to grab people's attentions better than others. And it's so important for parks to know which ones those are. So a simple a post-stay survey that said, hey, what did you like most about your site? And if they keep mentioning things of like a view, or they keep mentioning things like, oh, it was great that we had, 2 beds, or the kitchenette, or, whatever the case is, it was great. Like, you'll get some of that feedback, and then use that feedback 100% as those stock images that you're using to display those properties and to understand what it is that's catching those people's attention. Because at the end of the day, you want them to convert online. You don't want them to feel the need to call and ask these questions, because even asking questions over the phone isn't going to give you the representation of the site or the site type. So I love what Scott said there, and getting as granular as you can as far as on what images work. It's incredible at how much that helps convert, because you'll see a 20-30% conversion sometimes with the difference of some images.
And just to add really quick to what Casey said, because I think it's really important, hospitality it's many things, but really it's meeting people where they are. And so understand from your guest, and what I mean by that is understand from your guest what it is that resonates with them, and pursue that naming convention. Don't try to fit them into a box of what, like, I mean, I'll take ownership of that. I thought it was a really cool name, but what is it? And it's not really resonating as much as what I think the guest may actually be looking for. And so looking into that, having that post-stay survey, talking face-to-face with your guests when they're there, if you stop by after they've checked in, really just understand what it is that drew them there. I think that's a really good point, Casey. Just meeting people where they are. Don't try to be cute. Don't try to fit it into a box. Just really understand what's going to relate to the guest.
Well, and that serves another purpose too, right? The other purpose that serves is that stops the people potentially from airing their grievances publicly where other people can see it. And I remember years ago, we used to give away a book at convention. We were just doing review responses called Hug Your Haters. And we used to order dozens of copies of these, and we give people away at trade show booths, for talking about like how to treat your guests and how to but a portion of that book was, you've got to give, like, most of the complaints that come online are because they couldn't get a hold of you. They emailed you, they didn't get an answer. They tried to call you, they didn't get an answer. They went to your office and it was closed when they were checking out. And then the last resort usually, and certainly there are exceptions to this, there are the crazy people, right, who will go do it anyway. But most people, if you answer and give them sincere consideration and show them that you're listening, you understand their perspective, even if you don't agree with it and you're willing to listen and try to correct and improve where you can, that serves that other purpose too, of guarding your campground against potential negative press or opinion.
Yeah, I will say though, Brian, one thing I've noticed, and I feel like COVID just lit it on fire, was the guest who is intent on that refund or a credit. And you can kind of, if you're on the front lines, and I know some of you guys have worked your way off of it, and it's probably one of the things you miss on the touch point, but there's just a percentage of guests that are really aggressive about it. And I'm sort of I read that book, you gave that book to me and I read it. And I still think that, I kind of blame Nordstrom's. The Nordstrom's was the originator, I believe, of the customer is always right. And if you
they're not, to be clear.
Is mean, who's cruel to your team, who is a bad guest, and we just give them that slice of pizza, right? I think one of the examples in the book, if I'm remembering right, was from a pizza restaurant. Just give them a free pizza. Give them a free pizza. Well, we've taught our American consumers that if they're mean enough, really, let's just call it what it is, that they're going to get a free pizza. I think it's if your facility didn't let them down, if they're just mean, unrealistic, unhappy because it rained, right? Did not bother to research or make sure that this campground, even the most basic things, were right for them. I'm reluctant to buy into that mentality, and I think we're just perpetuating that over entitled. And I will say, often it's that American consumer. So I have a thing: you're mean to my team, we're going to break up, and that's it. You don't get to be mean to my team. And this is to the point that we were just talking about. My job is to take care of my team. My team is wonderful, hospitality-minded, bend over backwards. I know Britt has had some great conversations with my guys at the RV shows.
Yeah.
If they can't make you happy and you're mean to them, we're done. And I'm not giving them the pizza, Brian, just so you know. So
I'm not necessarily advocating for that, right? And I think I want to hear from some of the operators here instead of just me in a second about this topic.
Yeah.
But I'm not advocating for giving away free stuff. Like, if they're an asshole, let's just call it what it is, right? Because we're not censored by the FCC. I think we can say asshole. If they're assholes, then for sure, right? But you can still have that initial conversation with them. You can still say, try to solve their problem, because at the very least, in the worst case scenario, they leave you a 1-star review and scream at you. You can respond and say, hey, Peter, we tried to talk to you. We had a conversation in the office. And then that diffuses it for everybody else who reads it.
100% agree with that, Brian. Yeah, you have to be accessible. You have to be willing to hear them out. And so does your team. Because when we're tired and beat up after a long weekend with maybe 900 guests on site, sometimes the last thing you want to hear are those words, I just think you should know. But sometimes you got to brace, but sometimes you really do need to know. And sometimes you really don't, and you want to slit your wrists. I just think build a hospital. Somebody told me I should have a hospital closer to my campgrounds, and that I was really letting the guests down. I was like, are you really suggesting it's my responsibility to build and maintain medical facilities? Interesting perspective.
Yeah.
So some people are just crazy, right? But yes, no, Brian, differentiating between the two. And I think, the bigger operators that are here on the call with us, down to Britt and I that are still on the front lines, and maybe will always choose to have that role. Knowing the difference between the two is tough, and probably the biggest risk of burnout for our team and ourselves. I talked to a lot of campground owners like myself that have only made it 7 or 8 years in the industry and have sold. And some of it is because of the fact that campgrounds are so valuable these days, and there's people like Kevin and other investors that are happy to reach out to us when we're tired. But it's also that putting yourself out there and giving 100% can sometimes really be heartbreaking. And I think we neglect that conversation in this industry a little. I don't know. Does anybody else feel that with their team members or with themselves?
I think if I could jump in real quick.
Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
Brian. One thing that really just kind of popped into my mind as you were talking, Lelah, is those conversations are hard, right? I've been there, right? I've had the people that come in and scream at you, and we kind of have this zero tolerance policy of we're not going to let our guests abuse our team, right? Like I said before, my main responsibility is to take care of my team. If I do that, my team will take care of the guests. But also, I think there's a couple things. Is one, each situation is different. We have to provide some kind of a system or tool or training to whoever is on the front lines of, this is how you triage these situations, knowing that you can't just take one playbook and, it's not like a call center script. If they answer this, flip to page 12 and do this, right? That's a little bit too prescriptive. But think about the impact of what your example was, Lelah, on the other guests and on your team, where if someone comes in and they are unfairly verbally abusive to you or your team members, and you say, you know what, we're sorry that we couldn't make your stay enjoyable, but I think it's time for us to part ways. We'd like to ask you to leave. If that person really is a jerk and is causing problems, what message does that send to the guests that are in the site next to them that have been dealing with that person who's yelling at their kids and yelling at everybody and, making a mess? You've now just won over all of those other guests who are going to want to come back because they recognize that that's the experience they're going to get. And to the same level with your team, if they recognize that you have their back and you're not going to put up with that, they're going to want to come back and work for you. And, losing a bad guest is a lot better than losing a good guest and losing multiple. And so,
or a good employee, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not suggesting in any way that those conversations are easy. Like I said, I've been there, I've done it. It's hard and it is draining emotionally. And it's really difficult to work with, but it is important to feel comfortable that you can do that. You can say no, right? Because you can't let one bad apple ruin the experience for everybody else.
And it is like, no matter what business you're running, it's draining. Like it's draining emotionally for me in two different ways, right? With our clients, there's the flip side of like, I've let somebody down because I didn't do my job or a team member didn't do their job correctly. And so that's the case where like, we're not giving you the free pizza because you're angry. Like we actually did something wrong. We need to fix it and all that kind of stuff. And that's draining. But then there's the draining from the perspective of like, maybe we didn't do anything wrong and you're just that problem client or guest, but both of them are draining in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I would just say that the guest has gotten to be very demanding. One example I will give, and then please, like Brian, save me and direct us somewhere else to positive would be lovely, is cancellation policies. I have yet to, I think I had one guest last year who's like, I'm canceling. I know I'm outside of the cancellation policy. I understand that I will not be getting a refund. I think I had one person. Every other person, despite us giving some tools to our front desk staff, some technology solutions, has tried to escalate it all the way up to me. And it is getting, I don't know if this is accurate. I think Ojai put out a statistic that 20% of reservations are now canceling because they're either booking in advance, whatever, their circumstances have changed.
I want to hear some data on that in a second, but finish, Scott and Kevin, if you have any.
So that's one that's really exhausting for us. And I know it's out there because I see it on the campground owner forums, the frustration level. And I joke around that the only way to make the guests happy is to put an honor box at our exit gate and say, just pay us after your stay what you think we were worth. I've threatened.
What's going through my head, honestly?
I've actually threatened to do that. But
You
I
guys
would
are sitting here. Go ahead, finish, please.
are seeing and experiencing with that. Because if we're talking about enhancing guest experience, what I'm seeing is the guest wants to be able to cancel even after, like, say they were supposed to come in on Friday the 12th. On Monday the 15th, if I'm doing my math right, they call you and say, sorry, I couldn't make it. Can I have a refund? And they are expecting it. And it's a very difficult position to be in, especially if it's a relatively good guest. And I'd love to know what everyone is seeing with that.
Do you guys offer, Lelah, do you guys offer like a camp credit versus a user credit? Is that something that you have like looked at in terms of saying?
And last year we launched a product that we're calling, we just made it up ourselves, we call Travel Sure. So the guests can book and pay a non-refundable Travel Sure. We looked at different insurance programs, and I was very discouraged by the number of loopholes that the insurance companies had provided themselves. And I knew that if we sold somebody else's insurance product and the guest didn't get a refund, that they were still going to view me as the bad guy. And what I wanted was, so we're offering a program where if you pay the little bit premium, which is an add-on because that part is not refundable, you can cancel with 24 hours notice and we give you a full refund or credit if you choose a credit. And yes, we do credits a lot, Casey. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer. And we will hold your credit indefinitely. If you want to let me have your money interest-free.
Right.
So,
yeah, I'm just curious. Yeah, because I don't know if a lot of parks utilize that, and it seems like it's not an easy win to some extent, but it can at least, it seems like it can calm the nerves of saying, look, no, we don't have a refund because XYZ policy that you signed and agreed to. However, we'd love to see you. We'd love to have you at the park and enjoy your experience when the timing makes more sense.
I would say about half of them are not happy with the credit, even if you are making an exception. Like they were not due a credit or a refund based on our policy. You're like, we're going to give you a credit. And hey, normally it's only good for this camping season, but we're going to make it good for 5 years. I would say about 50% are still not happy. They want, and like I said, the requests, I don't know, maybe Britt, are you seeing that too?
Yeah, Britt, Brittany, you've been quiet. I'm sorry, I haven't had a chance to get you in here yet.
Is it because of our proximity to New York City and Boston, Britt? We just have these intense people that come in.
I mean, I don't know that. Let's not do the whole like big city slant. I don't know if that's actually accurate, but
especially last summer was pretty dry. Although the summer before that was so wet, so the cancellations were a lot because of the weather. Last season was dry. We did see a lot of cancellations and people who would escalate like, okay, I want to talk to the manager. I want to get my money back. To the point that once I get them, the first thing I do is try and give them a credit. It's real. Yeah, that I think we've gotten a lot of disgruntled people. I think one thing I tell a lot of the girls and guys in the staff is like, try doing, hey, I just talked to Britt. She was so busy, but I really pushed for you. I really wanted to help you out. I understand.
Like the car salesman.
Yeah, but like more so like, oh man, this sucks. And like she's usually kind of mean, but she was okay with it this time. Like kind of like shifted off of them a lot. And that sometimes like seems to work because then they'll like take down their tone, like, oh, okay, I was gonna be a jerk to you, but like you're also having to go through something. Not always, but sometimes.
Do we want to like? I feel like we want to encourage empowering of employees versus bullshitting of employees, though. And not that I'm not criticizing you at all, Brittany. I'm just speaking that into existence. Is that fair from operators on this call?
Totally.
Yeah.
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lelah.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I just did that. When it comes to, I always want my front desk to be the hero as much as possible, right. And I want to be the bad guy as much as possible. So, because I don't want my staff to dread picking up the phone. So I always want them to be able to be happy and upbeat. So I do have 2 managers other than myself. We take the no calls. We take the calls or the communications where I'm sorry, no, we're not going to be able to meet your needs. And we free the front desk from that because, one, the front desk is often visible to the public and we don't really want our next guest hearing that one-sided conversation. So if that makes sense, we take it on the chin. And maybe it's not the right way to go. It's just what we've been doing and we keep our front desk staff. Because what we were finding is the front desk staff was getting so discouraged that we felt it was having an impact on them coming back to us year after year.
Well, and I want to be clear, Brittany, I don't want to, I'm not saying that you're doing it wrong. I don't have the right to say that, and I didn't mean to imply that if that's the way it came across. But I do want to say, like, I mean, I think part of that is the staff that works for you, right? Can I find that really good staff member who I can trust enough to put the faith in to do the right thing and make the right call, which is very hard. So I apologize if it came across the wrong way.
Oh yeah, no. And I think so our, like, a lot of the times, like, the staff will know they are empowered in a way. They know when they can, and they know when, like, okay, this is going to, like, what, like, you can just tell by the guest. The guest is so angry, or they're not taking anything for an answer, allowing them, like, kind of that protection to be able to step back and be like, and shift it to somebody else, I think is super duper helpful. And them knowing too, like, okay, I'm always going to have your back no matter what. And I'll take that from you, so that, like, you're just not inundated with, like, angry people.
I want to circle back to this 20% number. Is there any data that shows that this is true?
I threw something out to our insights channel. See if my data team can get us some information here in the next.
Because I'm just curious. Like, I feel like, I mean, I understand. I don't understand. That's wrong. That's a lie, because I don't know the campground, right? I feel like I understand the perception that there's a lot of these people out here who are angry and irrational, but I don't know. I want to not believe that there are as many as people think they are in the Facebook groups. Does that make sense?
They are the loudest.
Yeah.
And so that creates an exaggeration of the size of that group of people. And, you know, it's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease, right? You're always going to fight the biggest fire. And, you know, I think for us, at least, and I'm not telling anybody else how to do this, I think there's kind of this level setting expectation of what's realistic. Is 0% cancellations a realistic goal? If it's not, you know, do we want to set, you know, is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Whatever that number is, I think it's important to monitor that and understand. To me, the trend is more important than what that specific number is, because a lot of that's outside of our control. And we can choose to focus on the minority percentage of our guests that are the loudest, that are, you know, the most, detrimental in the way they talk about us and reviews. And Brian, you talked about ways that you can address that. There's mitigation that you can do with reviews and how you handle that. Or do you spend time, effort, resources focusing on how do you improve the experience for everybody else who's going to be there, who's going to come back, who's going to tell their friends, and who's going to talk about you online in a way that's going to draw more people. And I'm not suggesting that cancellation isn't an important thing. That is a very polarizing topic, something that, at least within the KOA world, we've been talking about a lot lately, revisiting those policies and guidelines and how we're going to implement that. And, you know, how do you have opportunity to be flexible and empower your team, like you were saying, Brian, to make exceptions? Does that make sense? From our portfolio, I don't have the number. It's definitely well below 20%. But that doesn't mean that it's not changing. And I think that's what's important, is if we've been at, 1 to 5 to 10% for 5 years, and then all of a sudden it jumps to 20%, to me, that says there's something going on within the park, with the way that we're operating, with all the touch points, with the guest experience. That's what we need to focus on fixing. If we can deliver on that, then, it's hyper focusing on the actions and the habits and not the result or the outcome, because that will come depending on where you focus your time and your resources.
And those polarizing discussions, I think, need to be had once in a while, right? Like, I'd rather have people be mad at me for having a polarized discussion than be mad at your guest. But we need to figure out those things. And I think part of that is setting your goal. I think that's a good metric, right? Like, define what and make it realistic. It can't be 0%. But 5, 10, whatever that number is. I'm not an operator, so I can't make up something. But then try to hit that goal and recognize that, like you said, Kevin, there's all kinds of things that go into the cancellation factors. Some you can't control, like the weather. Like, Casey, can we put a message that says, hey, are you sure you want to come? It's pretty shitty here this weekend. Are you positive you want to click the book button? And then the cancellation numbers go down, right?
Put that there. We did put a sensible weather option there that you can pay to, if it does.
Yeah.
Amount,
but you understand what I'm saying, right? Like, maybe we're just not communicating the different things to the guest well enough, not just on the booking engine, of course, but on our websites and setting proper expectations. And maybe that only shaves 2% off or 5% or half a percentage, but it helps.
Yeah,
Well,
I think Lelah hit the nail on the head. I think there's bad customers. I mean, it's just
for sure there is. I just don't think there are as many as we think there are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think we also need to remember too, the industry is different than it was in terms of demand than a couple of years ago. And I'm just speaking from my experience, I'm seeing many operators that also, I think, haven't realized that we do need to bake in more flexibility into policies today than where we were, just a couple of years ago. And I think that, I'm involved. I was a full-time RVer, and I'm involved in camping, camper groups as well. And the sentiment is that the RV park owner is out to charge the highest rate and have the most restrictive policy. And I think we have to remember that there's some of that was probably true, right? Like, we're in this to make a profit, to make revenue.
Some of it still is with some owners that are at the same, probably small percentage as the problem guests.
Yeah. And I think, we went through we went through a portfolio review, and a good number of the properties, we loosened our cancellation policies like maybe midsummer last year. Just in response to that. So to Kevin's point, understanding the trend and how things are actually looking in the grand scheme of things. But then I think zooming back out a little bit and understanding what the market is, I think also understanding our guests are not just campers, they're hotel guests, they're airline passengers. And what are some of the other experiences that they're having in other sectors of hospitality, and how can we either save and create a better experience, save the experience, create a better experience, a respite from what they're used to having to deal with, or are there things that will looking at their perspective shape your perspective in terms of where they're potentially coming from as well?
So embrace how you can be better. Like, our exit doors don't fall off the cabins. Like that.
Yeah. One way.
One thing that was kind of said, and I think it is really great, and it's really positive to turn around to be positive. It's not necessarily to do with cancellations, but that notion of going to check on the neighboring campers to someone who was potentially a problem. I think making kind of bringing some humanity back and making people feel special for being decent campers has gone such a far way with our campground, and with getting really loyal campers to come back. And it's something as small as celebrating, hey, you're coming back for another time. Here's a sticker. We're so happy to see you again. Or if there was a problem, and going over and be hey, somebody was making a lot of noise. You didn't call or anything, but here's a free thing of wood. We're we recognize that you had to deal with that without you ever having without you becoming a squeaky wheel. And we get so much feedback. All of a sudden they're oh my God, you guys are amazing. And you guys really take care of people. And it's something that took maybe 5 minutes.
This is a fascinating topic that we don't have time to dive into today. But I think there's an era 5 to 10 years from now where we look back on this time period where we're sending out mass email marketing and mass text messaging and the same message on everybody's website, where every communication is personalized down to every guest of what we know in the database. And we look at this era fuck were we thinking? Sending the same message to everybody. I think that's going to come. I think AI is going to be a part of that. But I think that's going to be a guest experience that, like you talked about, you're going to know their birthday, you're going to know last time they visited. Everything's going to be personalized, and maybe that will make it less special when it gets to that point, but it's still going to be a better guest experience.
I think that's right. Luxury today is, and luxury is in the eye of the beholder, but luxury is recognition and it's personalization, and everybody wants that at no matter what type of luxury they seek out. So I think, to your point, Brian, maybe when everybody's receiving that, it's a little less of a special service today, but, ensuring that you're moving in that direction of understanding how you can collect that data and how you can, truly be a brand of hospitality for your park beyond just the one-time stay. but how you can really resonate and be an important part of your guest's life over the course of their year. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, but those special call out moments really do make a huge difference. And just that kind of reminds me of, I had heard just recently that interaction is not the same as interface. And I think, when you have that traditional like front desk experience where you're dealing with the guest and like that's your one moment, that's not an interaction. Like there's a transaction, but it's not really an interaction. But what Britt just said about going to the campsite and like meeting that guest and saying, I understand that, hey, this was a difficult situation, or even it doesn't have to be a bad situation. It could also just be, your courtesy patrol guy is out patrolling and he sees, maybe the dad or the mom that's having a hard time getting the campfire started. Maybe they just stop and say, hey, can I lend a hand with that? That's an interaction. So the more that we can continue to personalize, recognize, and interact, I think that's what people want today.
Let them know you care about them. Give them a touch point. Like on Joe's app, Joe, can we track their location forever? Can we just say like, hey, I saw you just went to Papa John's. Did you know we have a pizza restaurant? I know
I think there might be some privacy concerns with that, Brian.
But they know you're thinking about them then, right? It's the care that Scott was talking about.
Well, actually, I did want to jump in. We've camped at multiple properties that, while a lot of places don't have the staffing to do this, they right around quiet hours drive around the sites, and whoever's outside, they come and talk to them and say, hey, you're watching the movie. Oh, after that movie's over, would you mind turning it off? It's quiet hours soon, or just asking about your day. So one campground was a smaller 100 site, and the owner went by. He lived on site in that particular case, but he would drive by on his golf cart at night, right around quiet hours, and just talk to everybody. And it's a personal touch, and it's really hard to complain. It's really hard to ask for a refund when you know the owner. It's going to be a lot harder when you've met them and you recognize them as a person, as opposed to just this huge campground that we're dealing with. It's just a different level of a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember when we were in, I think it was Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. There's a Christmas themed hotel there all year round, and this is years ago. But I went there and filmed a video of their property. I think it was a Christmas Tree Inn or something like that. But they still, like, they came and they knocked on your door and did the turn down service and delivered little warm cookies to you, right? Like that stuff, that sticks. I've traveled a lot. And that stuff, for that to stick in a mind of me that's half senile and old and can't remember what they had for breakfast, is pretty impressive 10, 15 years later. So that stuff does, like, people remember that for a long time.
It's understanding expectations, right? Our guests, they have an expectation that, someone will answer the phone, someone will be there, that the site will be level, that they'll have, functioning electricity, bathrooms will be clean, right? There's a level of expectation. It's the opportunities where we can deliver above that. That's what they're going to remember, right? It's exceeding that. It's the special moment, and it does take a lot of effort. That's where the challenge is you have to actually go out and try and find those moments. And you can do all the planning you want of, hey, we're going to give some budget to the team that if they identify something, they can, give something from the store to a kid who's crying, or, whatever that situation may be. You can create that structure, but it's still going to take effort and motivation for the people on the ground and the front lines who are not just talking, like you were saying, Joe and Scott. And it's not just like having that discussion with them. It's how do you connect with them? And the challenge is it requires effort, it requires time, it requires emotion, but it's whatever you can do to go a little bit above and beyond what the base expectation is. Like you were saying, Brian, you'll remember that for years to come. And that may be how you get someone to come back. That may be your differentiator from the park down the street that's bigger, newer, bigger budget, nicer amenities, but maybe they don't provide that touch, or maybe they don't have that relationship with their guests that a small campground operator can have.
100% agree with you. The only thing I'll play devil's advocate on briefly is the effort, because I don't think, like, sometimes it's going to require effort, right? But like I still remember Traverse City KOA when we went there in 2000, maybe 11 or 12 or something like that, had little tiny local organic soaps in their cabin. And this is back when I was just starting to eat organic. And so I paid attention to that stuff, but that I still remember. And so that, like, sure, I guess it took effort to plan it a little bit, but once it's done, that's not as much effort as some of the other things. And so I'm not saying that that's going to work for everybody or that should be the strategy, but it doesn't have to require a lot of effort all the time.
No, it doesn't. And I think what's important to recognize is there's an opportunity for us to build that into our culture, who we are, how we operate, to where it's not actually extra effort. It's just what we do, versus having that expectation for our teams of, like, this is what we do, and this is all we do, and this is all we have time for. Like, we want to, like you were saying this earlier, Brian, how do we empower ourselves, our teams, to feel that is their job, that is what they need to do, that it's just a part of running the campground, versus this is what we do. We provide a place for people to stay. We answer the phone. We answer questions. It's a mentality thing. And how you overcome that is really how it's the indicator of how successful you'll be in delivering those special moments.
I will just briefly say, like, anybody who needs to drop off is more than welcome to drop off. But if you want to stay for a couple minutes, we can stay for a few minutes and continue our conversation. So does anybody else want to add anything?
Well, I was going to just speak to Kevin's comment there and yours, Brian. We stopped at Aspen Grove in Utah, and they had cookies for everybody when we stepped in, and they had little cookies for dogs as well. And it's just something, if you're a dog owner, you're going to remember when they ask you, oh, do you have a dog? Here's a cookie for them also. And there's a lot of parks that do that, but as we said, it's that little personal touch that they get you. Another park we stayed at, after you get set up and checked in, they brought over champagne to us, to my wife and I. And then at 4:00 every day, they drive around on a golf cart and give margaritas out to everybody. We have 6 children. And before they came over, they went and filled up 6 strawberry lemonades for the kids.
See,
So
you needed those margs, Joe. You needed those margs.
No, that's right. That's right. But I posted about that in an upscale RV resort page, and that's probably about as much engagement I've ever had on a post for anything. It wasn't business related at all. It was just my personal experience of this one park, and that one experience got a few hundred people interested in going to this small park in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. There's just, boils down to the care and really showing, that you are thinking. It's the thought, it's the effort that you're making. The guest sees that. It doesn't have to be a lot. And what's sad is just stopping by to interact with someone is not the norm. Like, that alone will set your park apart, at least in terms of the hospitality that they've had. And that is exciting, right? Because that shows all of the upside and potential that we have as an industry. But I think for the independent operators that are still listening, I think all of this can sound really great, but also maybe all a bit theoretical too. And I know, as does all the other panelists, we know what you're going through on a day-to-day basis. And I would just say for you, how you can maybe look at how to attack this is beginning to prioritize what it is you need to be spending time on as a business owner, and recognizing that there's a season for you that you're likely going to be very busy in the office, maybe running the front desk, running around. And then there's a period of time, hopefully you have a bit of a respite where you can work on the business itself. And, understanding if you can carve out 30 minutes a week, just start small with creative time. Creativity is a process, and you need to make sure that you have that time that you can practice that process, and that creative component is important to think through that guest experience and how you can be maybe a bit more creative with that process itself. And then find other people to do the other things that you don't want to have time, that you don't want to have to do, or that you feel like might not be the best return for your time spent. And ask your guests, through those post-stay surveys. Ask your front desk team and your maintenance team what they're hearing from guests as those pain points. But just really, I think it's about carving out the time and prioritizing this in your off season as much as you can, and then finding people to do other things that aren't related to the guest experience component itself, and building your team, because that's how, excuse me, I think you'll build sustainability in your business, is taking care of your team and then taking care of your guests.
Or automate them.
Yeah.
Automate the touch points, right? Like, I mean, let's be honest. Like, you're hitting on a really big nail, or I don't know if that's the right phrase, right? You're hitting on a really important point here, is that there are probably a lot of people watching this show who are saying, like, this is all well and good, but then how many people are actually going to leave here and do something about it? And you're probably all on this show who know me amazed that I've been an hour and a half without saying this, but like, go to ChatGPT. This is not a thing anymore. Like, go to ChatGPT, sign up for a free account, and say, I am a busy park owner and I want to improve my guest experience. I only have 15 minutes a week. Where do I start?
Totally.
Yeah. One thing that I would say that ties into a little bit of both of these, and one is, so we do a lot of automation. We love our technology here. And the thing is, you can kind of get killed by your own technology if you don't step back and look at it. So I just said to my team today, every single one of us is going to make a fake booking. Well, it would be a real booking. Our reservation software will think, and we're going to get every single touch point that the guest would get. Because over time, you can end up with do not and don't you dare. And sometimes the communication pieces are, I said, we're going to be looking at tone. We're going to be looking at accuracy, because over time policies get tweaked a little. And did we make sure to check every single template? And we're going to be looking at brevity. Are we sending too much stuff to people? Or I doubt it's not going to be not enough. But that's one thing that doesn't really take that long. We shouldn't get that many emails, and we'll just be reading them as if we're the guest experiencing the pre-check-in process. So it's a combination of automation and the technology, and making sure that, to Kevin's point, that we look at our stuff, not just the first time we set it up, but on an ongoing basis. It's funny. I used to walk the campground every single Sunday morning, and I would say, largely it was a checkout day, right? So I'd be checking in with people and saying goodbye to them. I don't think I'll do it ever again. It offered a lot to me as a new owner. But it was, it was one of those things that actually was very exhausting. I was already like at the end of my emotional reserves, because I would work, I don't know, I don't even want to know the hours, right? Because I was still very much at the front line, didn't have the kind of support staff I did now. But at some point, if you're doing your job right, you're starting to get a very repetitive message. I offer opportunities for people to meet me throughout their day. I don't know if that makes sense. It was a very helpful tool in the beginning. It might be great if you just bought your park, but as a sustainable practice, I didn't find it sustainable. And I'd be curious about how you guys feel about something like that. Is that something where you wish managers, if you have multiple parks, or owners were doing, or do you kind of see how I would reach that fatigue point? And also sort of a diminishing returns, because I had heard what the guests collectively needed to say to me. Excluding a one-off bad encounter, I had learned what they were looking for our facility, for the different types of guests that we have. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think, Lelah, what you've incorporated with that post-arrival text message is great to help obtain some level of real-time feedback to help reduce that burden. And, I know that Brian will have solutions for us to consider as well. But the more that you can, I think, utilize technology for the benefit of capturing that feedback while reducing the amount of time that you're having to spend collecting the feedback, but most importantly is utilizing that as a hospitality tool. And so, as an example, maybe you can inquire in that first text message, inquire with your guest if they would like for you to check in with them throughout their stay. The ones that want that interaction will say yes. And then you can have triggered text messages beyond that would, maybe check in at whatever frequency it is for the length of stay. We've had some level of success with that. But then they also have the option to say no. And again, preference. So utilize, finding those technology solutions to help save your time, because I can imagine that would be really hard especially once late August comes in. Yes, I think finding the technology solution and then really understanding the hospitality tool that it's serving and how it's a win and not a burden for you to set up or your guests to receive.
Personalization and thoughtfulness. Like, you can't just automate for the sake of automating. No one's arguing for that. Well, somebody is, but nobody on the show, right? So
one of the panelists, maybe the host.
Yeah, well, no, I'm not. Like, I like, you should. There's lots of things you can automate, but you can automate to make it better, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the key is putting thought into, like, does this actually make the guest experience better, or does it just make my life easier? It has to do both.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Lelah, think about it. Like, our guests are evolving. They're very different today than they were 5-10 years ago, right? The world is evolving. Expectations are evolving. And I think that it's important that we step back and say, well, what are we achieving by doing this? And what's the impact? And is there a different way that I could get that same result? And it's absolutely something we should be doing on a regular basis, of trying new things, doing it different, right? You got to take swings, and you're not going to hit on every one of them. But if we just do the same thing that we've always done, we're going to get the same results. So I think it is important to reevaluate on a regular basis. What are the things that we're doing? What's having a big impact? Is that the right way to do it? Do we continue it? Do we expand on it? What are the things that we are doing because we've always done them, and maybe they're not actually driving value for us as owners, as operators? It's not driving value for our guests, and then rethink it and do it differently. Because I think, I think part of your question and what you said made me believe that the reason you've lasted and you're in the position you're in now over some of the other operators and owners that that have burnt out is you have made that change, right? You realize that was going to have an impact on you. So you've changed the way that you've done it, and you found different ways that are maybe more scalable or more repeatable. And that's a never-ending process.
Well, what's funny too is when we bought our first campground, we had never camped a day in our lives. So I had a lot to learn. And walking the property and talking to real campers, and eventually turning into a big camper myself, was important. But those walks were really needed because they were educating me every step of the way. And anybody that's gotten into this business, having camped their whole lives, had a big leg up on me. My first week I had a cheat sheet. This is a fifth wheel. This is a travel trailer. A little scary there, but I don't ever mind a new adventure. So, but yeah, no. And then technology, as we know it now, just didn't exist then. I didn't have the ability to text the guests and say, hey, how are you doing? And we knew we needed to make a lot of changes. Cozy was a turnaround operation. So letting people know, yeah, we know. Not that we know what to do, but we are listening to you, so we will know what changes need to happen. And address those changes. That was very preemptive to Brian's point, to get those bad reviews straight to my ears and not on the internet, because the sites and the facility needed some TLC. Yeah.
All right, I've got to be the bad guy here because I would love to continue this conversation, but Lisa just told me somebody booked an appointment with me in a minute and a half, and I have to go to another meeting. So thank you guys all for joining us. It's a great discussion. Obviously, if you're interested in the guest experience and the things that we've been talking about in the show, we'll have different individual campground owners like Brittany and Lelah on here every week, but we'll have our panel of recurring guests here. Joe from At My Community, Casey from CampSpot, Kevin from KC and Campgrounds, Scott Foos from Horizon Outdoor Hospitality, and maybe Zach Stoltenberg. He's supposed to be here too, but it's the holidays. Does architecture for Clockwork as well. But thank you guys for joining us in another episode of MC Fireside Chats, our first one of 2025. Really looking forward to talking to you guys as a group and seeing if we can dive more into this guest experience and have some of these conversations that will truly help people in all facets, from reservations to talking to their guests on their park. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. And we'll see you next week for another episode.
Thank you.
Thanks Thanks for joining us for this episode of MC Fireside Chats with your host, Brian Searl. Have a suggestion for a show idea? Want your campground or company in a future episode? Email us at hello@moderncampground.com. Get your daily dose of news from moderncampground.com. And be sure to join us next week for more insights into the fascinating world of outdoor hospitality.